All right, if you guys want to grab your seats, we're glad to get started. We don't have a microphone, so hopefully everybody can hear me okay, but just let me know if you need me to repeat anything. My name is Andy Beaucaire, and I'm going to present today just so you guys can see what's going on. The purpose of this meeting was to get together and just talk about all these city initiatives that have been happening. Some of you have seen some things in the news, some of you may not, but we feel very important because it may have an outcome, may have an effect on our neighborhood, so it may have a very drastic effect on our neighborhood, so we think it's important to go through everything. I'm going to spend about 20 minutes just showing slides on what's happening out there, the information we've been able to find. When I'm through my part, Lisa Gordon's going to talk for a few minutes about what's happening with some of the Druid Hill schools, including Fernbank and middle school and high school, and a little bit of what's happening with this charter cluster. So that's basically it. There are no cards around. If you guys want to write your questions down, we'll get to all the questions at the end. And please, if you didn't sign in, make sure you do, because if I get your email addresses, we're going to have an online forum that everybody can ask questions. We'll do our best to answer. We can direct you to different websites and resources. We are also going to take this presentation and put up a recording online after we're done. So for anybody that can't make it, make sure you spread the word to those people to get a hold of us to get the link. It'll be on the Parkwood Garden Club website when we're all done. So again, questions, write them on no card. We'll collect them, and at the end we'll go through them all. So one thing I do want to point out, there's a small group of people that's kind of gotten together just to pull this information together. Myself, Dan Mallory, Brian Bell, Karna Candler, Tom Bell, who am I missing? Sherry Kennedy. We're just a group of neighbors that are just trying to get the word out here. So don't take this for anything more than that at this point. We're not trying to tell you have to make a decision about something tonight or anything like that. But we really don't want everybody in the neighborhood just collecting all their information through rumors and gossip. So we're trying to point you in the direction of the different city proposals and the websites that are out there. So over the next couple of weeks, you can start thinking about what impact this is going to have to you and your property and your family. So with that said, let me jump right into the city proposals that have been happening out there. You may have heard of some of these, you may not have heard of all of them. The first three I'll start with are actually Tucker, Lakeside, and Briarcliff. There's a handy map out there for anybody that has not seen this that shows the areas that have been proposed for these new cities, okay? So you can see Tucker overlaps with Lakeside, Lakeside overlaps with Briarcliff. So we've got three essentially overlapping city proposals that are all being submitted to the state for voting next year, okay?
Would you outline all three?
Yeah, so Tucker's up here just outside of 285. Lakeside is in the red, and the majority of it is inside of 85 and 285, but there's a couple little jut outs that have to do with properties they want to bring in, commercial properties and businesses that they want to bring in. And then Briarcliff is actually the one that includes our neighborhood. So this includes the Parkwoods down here just to the west of Decatur. And the way Briarcliff is designed is it's meant to extend all the way below 85 and inside of 285 all the way down to Avondale Estates in Decatur. So their whole philosophy is that they want to be inclusive of everybody inside of that area. And so you'll notice with the Lakeside proposal, there's a big gap between Atlanta and Decatur and Lakeside. So that gap, part of that gap encompasses Druid Hills, the bigger portion of Druid Hills, and then there's some other parts to the northeast of Decatur that are also in that gap. So you can see, depending on how everything shapes up with these city proposals, some of them have a pretty big effect on us. Some, you could make the case, may not, but in reality, if, let's say, Lakeside or Tucker are cities that get formed, there is an effect because the unincorporated portion of DeKalb is going to become smaller. All right. There's another city that's being proposed for Stonecrest. The boundaries of this do not come close to us, but this is down at the southeastern part of the county. But it's important for everybody to just be aware of this, that this is happening. So there's actually a fifth as well. There's the city of DeKalb, which has been proposed. There's a placeholder that's been put on with the state assembly. that city would actually include all of the unincorporated portion of DeKalb. Okay, so the other four, Lakeside, Briarcliff, Tucker, and Stonecrest, have defined boundaries based on the groups that got together and the reasons that they have to form those areas. And then City of DeKalb has been formed as kind of a way to block some of the other cities from going forward. So we can talk about that a little bit more. But some of the details on here, and this is not everything, you have to kind of go and look up more of this information afterwards. But as I mentioned, Briarcliff, Lakeside, and Tucker have overlapping areas. Stonecrest does not affect our neighborhood, but Briarcliff does directly affect it. The first four of the city proposals that I mentioned have raised enough money to begin what's called the feasibility study. Okay, so that means they've submitted $30,000 to either Georgia State or the Carl Vinson Institute to have a feasibility study done, and that takes about 6 months. So Briarcliff, Lakeside, Tucker, and Stonecrest have all collected enough money and submitted that. Those feasibility studies are in process right now. The city of DeKalb has not collected enough money to submit that. So because it takes 6 months, they're going to be a little bit behind these other initiatives. And I'll talk about the timing in a few slides and why that's important. Number-wise, Briarcliff is the biggest land area and biggest population with 92,000 residents that they're proposing. So again, that would be the one that we would be included in. Lakeside, Tucker, Stonecrest are slightly smaller. DeKalb would cover all of the unincorporated area. It's actually not quite 700,000 residents. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but you have to take out some of the cities that are already formed. So it's closer to about 575,000 residents, I believe, in the unincorporated portion. And then just for reference, in case you don't know, Decatur has just under 20,000 residents, and Brookhaven has about 45,000 residents. So size-wise, you can get a feel for where these fall in. All right, so just so you guys understand, when the feasibility studies come back, so they're trying to get these done by around January or February, and I don't know exactly when the State Assembly comes back into session, but it's sometime in the winter, in those winter months. Once they come back into session, if a feasibility study is done at that point and submitted, essentially that means that the boundaries are all drawn, they've gotten their placeholder on, the money's been collected, they've done all. The first three things are done, okay? So what we're looking at really is when they come back in January, February, we're really looking at step 4 through 6. So essentially the state's gonna look at the feasibility study, they're gonna vote on all of those city proposals. They're going to have some kind of vote, some kind of discussion, and if they come back with any of them being approved, then essentially they could move on to a local vote, a community vote, which would cover everybody within the proposed boundaries. Okay, so let me just clarify what that means. If the city of Lakeside comes back and is voted as approved, all of the people that are included in the drawn boundaries for Lakeside would actually have a vote. And they would essentially just need 50% plus 1 in order for that to be a passing vote. Okay, so in our case, going into the city of Briarcliff, if that's something that comes to pass, we're talking about 92,000 residents, and our vote would encompass, I think, about 100, 125. So it's a very small part, and that's important because whatever we do over the next few months, if let's say the city of Briarcliff does become something that's voted on, we may not have a very significant role in that vote. Okay. As far as the assembly goes, when they come back into session, the thought is that the feasibility studies, I don't know that much about feasibility studies, how they work exactly. I don't know if there's a threshold that they have to meet for the state to actually take them seriously, or if they just have to have the feasibility study essentially done for there to be a vote on. But once the assembly does look at these, they have pretty much 3 options. They can either vote no for one of the cities, or vote no for potentially 2 of the cities, and yes for others. They can propose new boundaries. Traditionally, they do not do that. That's our understanding, is that traditionally they're not going to change the boundaries of a proposed city, but they would probably push back to the community members and say, you either need to redraw these boundaries, or here's here's the criteria that you need to meet in order to resubmit a proposal. Or they could vote no for everything, and just, you know, everybody would have to regroup and go from there. So it's really a big unknown, is what I'm trying to say. Once the state assembly looks at everything in the winter months, we don't really know what will happen. We just know what could happen. For anybody that just came in, there's some note cards. If you have any questions, please write them down. We'll collect them. We're going to answer questions at the end. So in this portion of the slides, just, you know, I'm only referring to Briarcliff and Lakeside, so I'm not talking about Tucker or Stonecrest or City of DeKalb anymore. Just Briarcliff and Lakeside, because these are the two that really have the biggest impact on our neighborhood. So within a city proposal, you have to choose a minimum of 3 services out of a total of 11 that you're going to include with your city. So pretty much all of these cities have looked at law enforcement as something they want to own on their own. They want to create their own police force. Road and street construction maintenance, they've all taken on. Planning and zoning and recreational facilities. So all the parks and rec, that would all fall within those cities. And then the only difference between Briarcliff and Lakeside really is Briarcliff is elected to take on enforcement of building, housing, plumbing, and electrical codes, and Lakeside has not. So you can see from the services they've chosen which of these services is important, and you kind of get a sense of why they're looking at forming their cities based on, I mean, if you think about the Clifton Ridge issue that came up, I mean, there's a big reason for planning and zoning to be part of a city that gets formed. Timeline. This is the shortest potential timeline that could happen, and I want to make sure everybody understands this. If one of these cities is voted yes, essentially by the state assembly in the winter months, at that point, that could go to a referendum vote or a community vote, which could happen as early as about June. And if that community votes yes to one of these things, essentially by the end of 2014 or the beginning of 2015, one of these cities could be starting. So it can happen that fast. And we're not behind on any of this, but I don't know that everybody is aware of just how fast it can actually take place. So it's important for everybody to be thinking about this right now, and figuring out how it's going to affect them. There's all kinds of reasons for why people want to form cities, and I can't speak to each person that has gotten together and formed these proposals, but a lot of the big issues are policing, again, response times, zoning, things like the Clifton Ridge, a lot of the petty crimes and burglaries that have gone on, politics. Politics obviously plays a big part in it. Some of the recent cities that have gone through, Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, Brookhaven, they've obviously set a precedent for what can happen. Brookhaven is very new, so everybody's got their eye on it to see how they're going to form. If you've seen anything in the news, they just passed a new millage rate, so they've kind of got their taxes set. Their police force is now in effect. Their city hall is up and running. It's a full-scale city, and that happened pretty fast. So you can see what's going on there. Whether or not it's all good is up to everybody else to decide, but it is happening pretty fast. Dunwoody's been around for a couple years, so you can take that as another good example of a city of, I think there's about 47,000 people in Dunwoody. You can look at their different statistics for their taxes, their police, their schools, all that kind of thing, and get a sense of how they're doing as well after a couple years. All right, so now the very important part, the effects on our neighborhood, things that we believe everybody should be thinking about and talking about. First of all, if you know our map, you know that the Decatur city line pretty much cuts through the middle of our neighborhood. The railroad kind of gives us a border on the other side. This is very unique to Decatur, having this property line, or having their city line cut through properties. I don't believe there's any other bordering area of Decatur where the property line is, directly through people's, splitting people's properties in half where they pay 2 taxes. So it's a very unique situation for us, and obviously half the communities in Decatur, half is in unincorporated DeKalb. But just so you get a sense of how many properties we're talking about, I don't have all the numbers on here, but I think it's about 75 properties in the traditional Parkwood Garden Club that are either partially in unincorporated or all in unincorporated DeKalb. And I think there's about 12 to 15 properties that are split. And then there's, obviously some properties on East Lake Drive that go up against the railroad, some on ponds, but this just gives you a sense of what kind of boundaries we're talking about. Very important note on schools, and this cannot be understated. A new city that forms in DeKalb County will not have control over the public schools, okay? They will not be able to form new school zones. They will not be able to form new school districts, all right? So if Briarcliff, Lakeside, or Tucker are formed, they cannot immediately influence their public school systems. I shouldn't say it can't influence. They can certainly influence as a community, but they can't change their zoning. So if you have a student that's enrolled in a school that becomes part of one of those cities, that school zone is not going to change, not immediately. It would take a very big change of the law for that to become different. Now, Decatur, Atlanta, Marietta, those cities formed their own school zones prior to that law going into effect. So those cities do have their own school zones, and that's been grandfathered in. So if, for instance, Briarcliff or Lakeside were to form, there's going to be no change in the school zone for students enrolled there. But if this neighborhood was annexed into Decatur or Atlanta, there would be a change, and you would go into one of those city schools. So very important to understand how that all works, especially for the new cities, so you understand they don't have as much effect on the school right away as people might think. Now taxes is a different story. New cities would calculate their own millage rate on taxes. They would have a significant effect on how the taxes come to play. You can refer to Brookhaven and Dunwoody for examples of what's been going on recently. You can refer to any of the other cities within DeKalb to look at their tax rates. But those are all calculated by the city, so that's a big difference. At this point, it's too early to make any kind of guess as to what a Briarcliff, a Lakeside, or a Tucker, or a Stonecrest tax rate would look like. We really couldn't say, and I don't think anybody else will be able to give you an accurate guess at that either. And then within the city, within the county of DeKalb, I'll show there's quite a few cities within DeKalb already. Some are very small, but the tax rates do vary fairly widely. Obviously, one of the big effects on tax rate is the school. So Decatur, a big portion of the Decatur tax is going to the Decatur school system. But they're not the most expensive. Pine Lake and a couple other cities do have higher tax rates than Decatur, and they do not have their own school zone. So that's just part of how they're set up, how they pay for their policing, how they pay for their services. There is a really good website out there that's got a property tax calculator. I'd encourage you to go look at it, go play with some of the numbers to kind of understand how this all works. But this is a big discussion point for everything that happens here. Safety and policing. Again, because Briarcliff and Lakeside are interested in forming their own police departments, and obviously Decatur has their own, Atlanta has their own, this is something that will have a big effect on our neighborhood, depending on what happens. I pulled some numbers on police per 1,000 residents, but actually it was pointed out to me before the presentation that looking at this as police per square mile might even be a better way to look at it. So we're going to put some numbers together and make them available for people later on to look at the different cities within DeKalb, because it's very important. For instance, Pine Lake has almost no residents, and they have their own police force, so they've got a very high rate per 1,000 residents. They're also going to have a very high rate per square mile. Decatur only has 2.9, almost 3 police per 1,000 residents, but they're in a pretty small square mile area. So if you look at their police per square mile compared to Atlanta or compared to unincorporated DeKalb County, there's going to be a big difference there. So we're going to try to put some of those numbers together so everybody can see them. But obviously that's a big part of this debate, because people do believe that they're going to get better response times, better control over the crime that's happening in the community with these different cities that are being proposed. All right, so what we can do at this point, and what everybody I'm sure is going to spend the next couple weeks and month talking about. We have a few options if we choose to do anything. Obviously, one of them is to take no action. But if you've seen what we've talked about so far, if we do nothing, there's a very good chance that we will end up in a city. What city that is, we may not have a choice on, but There's a lot of conversation happening just in general about cityhood, and people are kind of making land grabs. So, you know, if we don't control our own destiny, then we're probably going to have that choice taken away from us. So, again, it is an option, but everybody should weigh that pretty heavily. We could approach Briarcliff and look to throw our support in, or really fight them on it and try to not be part of that city. We could seek annexation into Decatur. That's absolutely an option. We could seek annexation into Atlanta. I think either one of them would be open to the conversation if we decided to bring that up with them.
So we can annex the city and Oregon.
Can you write your question down if you don't mind? You know? Yeah. No, I mean, the question is, we could be annexed into Decatur or Atlanta, and absolutely we could. We could choose to do that on our own. We could choose to submit a proposal to be annexed, or one of those cities could annex us without our say. Those are both very viable. There are a lot of conversations, as I mentioned, already happening. The Druid Hills Civic Committee has been looking at putting together a proposal to annex into Atlanta for the entire Druid Hills neighborhood. They've actually been very active with all the conversations regarding Lakeside and Briarcliff, and it looks like at this point they're going to try to make a push to become annexed into Atlanta. Half of Druid Hills is already in Atlanta, so I think part of their logic is that they would just join, you know, the city that they're already part of. The city of Decatur, if you go to their website, you can actually look at their annexation plans. They have a very active proposal on commercial property and residential that they do want to bring into their city. They have had some of these go through successfully. They've had some of them fail over the last couple of years, but they've got a very active and very published plan, so that's readily available. As far as I know, the city of Atlanta has not proposed any firm annexation plans to bring in Druid Hills, but like I say, we do know that they're all talking. So we're early in that, but not that's been happening for the last few weeks, probably the last few months. And then DeKalb County officials are actually getting together and trying to figure out, you know, I mentioned the proposed city of DeKalb. So the DeKalb officials are trying to figure out what's going to be best for DeKalb. Obviously, with any of these cities that form, they're going to take money away from the unincorporated portion of DeKalb. So they're trying to protect themselves and keep their tax base together as much as they can as well. The next steps for us, you know, we're having this meeting to make sure everybody just becomes aware of what's happening. As I mentioned, we're going to take this presentation, we're going to put it up online so people can hopefully listen to it. We're going to put as many links out there as we can for these cities that are being proposed, for some of the resources that are available. We've got a forum that we created to answer questions as best we can. Again, I don't know that any of us are tax experts or police experts, I'm certainly not, but we can at least try to direct people to the news, to the websites that have already been created out there so they can look up the information. We are going to meet again. We've got another meeting scheduled right here for 2 weeks from now. And you know, we're hoping between now and then, everybody in the neighborhood takes a little bit of time to do some research on their own to talk about it. Because if we're going to do something, if we're going to take any one of these options, you know, we're going to have to think about moving fast on that. Representatives from the cities are available. If we want to talk with them in whatever forum we decide is appropriate, we can do that. They are having regular meetings for the cities of Briarcliff, Lakeside, Tucker, Stonecrest, and even the city of DeKalb now. So you know, people are free to attend those meetings as they want to. We can bring people in to have discussions, however we think is most appropriate. I do want to make sure I just emphasize again that, like I said earlier, if one of these cities that's proposed does get passed by the state legislature, then it's only going to take 50% plus one vote for that to go through. So again, our 100 and some residents in this community are not going to have a lot of pull in that decision. Okay. And my final points, our neighborhood actually is in pretty high demand. We have some natural boundaries around us with the railroad tracks and with Ponce being a major road to the north of us. Obviously, we're a split neighborhood, so you know, Decatur is aware of how we're set up. Druid Hills, we're part of the historic district in Druid Hills, so we're included in that. In general, I mean, something is probably going to happen with this neighborhood. I don't think sitting back and doing nothing is going to result in us staying in unincorporated DeKalb County. That's my opinion. But for all of you, keep in mind schools, the zoning, taxes, property values, and your safety and police response rates. I think these are the key things that we want to make sure everybody is really discussing as we get out of this. So with that, we've got this forum that we're going to get this link out to everybody. If you left your email address, I'll send you an invite so you can sign up. Again, we're going to try to post as much as we can out there. It's just going to be for people that sign up there. It's not a public forum. It's just for the people that we invite. So that'll be available. I'm actually going to let Lisa come up and talk about the Druid Hills Charter Cluster, and afterwards we're going to do Q&A. So please write down,
Can we collect the questions?
Yeah. We can collect them now, and yeah, absolutely. It's
Just raise your
the
hand if you've
the
got
right arrow.
a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey y'all, I'm Lisa Gordon. I'm 198 East Parkwood Road. My driveway's in Decatur. The rest of my house is in Druid, where are we? Unincorporated DeKalb. And like most people, I really thought long and hard about where we bought our house because we wanted to be in unincorporated DeKalb. We did not want to pay City of Decatur taxes back then, 23 years ago. We couldn't have afforded to pay Decatur taxes. I'm not sure I can still afford to pay Decatur taxes. But I am, so my world is about partially the taxes, but my whole world right now has been a lot about schools. My children have been in DeKalb County Schools since 1999. I'm currently the PTA president at Druid Hills High School. I've been the PTA president at Druid Hills Middle School. This is like my world. I do this all the time. So I got talking to Sherry on a walk one day about the effects that this would have on the schools. And so she was gracious enough, her and Andy, to give me a couple minutes just to talk about that, because it really will change things. I went to one of the Briarcliff meetings, and Sherry was at the same one. And I went there so that I could tell them how much I was upset with them for coming up with this proposal to change and kind of pull our area into a cityhood, because I have no interest whatsoever in cityhood. Have to admit, by the time I left, I actually had changed my opinion a little bit, and that was in part because one of the things that they said that I didn't realize was how much, like Andy put all the stuff up about Brookhaven and Dunwoody, and then they really made this great case that whether we like it or not, there really is kind of this shifting to cityhood, especially in this area, and that one of the things that Briarcliff came up with as a plan was to not leave this hole that's not a city surrounded by all things that are a city. And that started to be something that gave me a little bit of concern, partially because of like the safety issues. Like, really, are they going to leave some DeKalb County cops like in that little circle there for us, when everybody else is being serviced by everybody else? But then once I got looking at it, it gives me chills when I see a sign like a slide like Andy puts up, which is that I'm telling you that a lot of talk is starting to happen more about being annexed into, if we get left in that hole that is not part of anything else, the conversations about getting annexed into Atlanta and Decatur are going to really increase. So they've been going on the whole 23 years that I've been here. But for me, the issue there is the schools, because that will change the school district. So I'm giving just a 2-second overview of the school district, because some of you may not have kids that are in the school system, or you may not have, you may have little ones that are not there yet. But here's some of the things that are going on in the school system that I think are worth considering as we talk about. If we go to Decatur, we would most likely still go to Oakhurst. When we got to this area, the Decatur school system was this really thriving. Decatur's a phenomenal school system, just a phenomenal school system. But right now, the school system has more than doubled in population. So they've really had to do a lot of stuff. Like right now, the schools are a little bit overcrowded. They're still excellent, excellent schools, and they're all very close to our neighborhood, which is really great. But they are really suffering with some issues related to overcrowding. If we stay in DeKalb County, what we would be is Fernbank Elementary, which is about a half-mile walk across the street. There is a crossing guard there because it is hard to,
Not now.
it's what?
Not now.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. And so it is on Heaton Park Drive. It is about to be torn down, as most of you may know, and it's getting ready to be rebuilt, and is going to hold up to 900 students. So Fernbank Elementary is temporarily relocated to Avondale during the rebuilding of the school. But it's about to be this beautiful new school that will have capacity for all of the grades. They really got really overcrowded. But both of my kids went through Fernbank, and Fernbank is a phenomenal elementary school. It's just, people refer to it as like a private public school. It is such a good school. It has great parent involvement. It's a really great school. It became an IB school while my kids were in there, and so for all the kids that are in that school, it's IB for all the children. Druid Hills Middle, which was recently renamed a couple years ago, has also undergone these beautiful renovations. There's a really good community that has formed around this. This has also become an IB school. Our school system right now, Fernbank, Druid Hills Middle, Druid Hills High School, it's one of the few schools in the state where you can get a international baccalaureate diploma going through all grades except for 2. And it's been recently renovated. It's got full capacity for all the kids in the neighborhood. And it is a little farther away. It is down behind the Shamrock Plaza. But then by the high school, you do come back into the neighborhood. The high school is also had a lot of renovation done. It's got this beautiful new science wing. The school is no longer subject to No Child Left Behind. We used to get a lot of transfers in, but that has now changed, and so it's got a very stable student population. That's the resident schools just within the district, and it graduates around 350 kids per class, per grade. And I did want to say too that one of the reasons that I have really fallen in love with the school system, which has been so good for my kids too, is Druid Hills High School is one of the oldest schools. It's got a great history. It has this annual float building thing that's been going on since the 30s. I don't know, sometimes it has actually been, the float building's been in the neighborhood, which has been really fun, which is this week-long thing. This was one of the floats that was this year in the homecoming parade. It's got these great, rich traditions that my children have been part of, like float building and homecoming and stunt night. It's got the oldest school newspaper in the state, which was and which won all these awards last year. And so the Druid Hills School District has become part of our world, and if we change, or if we get annexed even partially, and it would be weird, as I look at our neighbors on Eastlake, as we talk about annexation, and if they came over, say, in Decatur over to the railroad lines, then that would leave this very small slice of just Eastlake and Ridgecrest and Lakeshore that would then be going over to the Druid Hills area. And so, for me, I would very much like my house to stay into the Druid Hills School District, and I really feel like it would be losing a lot for us personally, both to have my taxes go up, but also to have the schools change. If we went to the City of Atlanta school system, most likely our elementary school would be Mary Lynn, our middle school would be Inman, which is on the other side of Virginia Highlands, and then Grady High School, which is over towards on the other side of Virginia Highlands. So that's pretty far away if we ended up going into the Atlanta side versus Decatur. Advantages, disadvantages to all 3 school systems, but right now we've got this system that is really good and has a lot of capacity for the children in the neighborhood, and both Atlanta and Decatur are having real overcrowding problems now. So I just wanted to point out some of the things that are going on with the schools and why it would be a real loss for us.
Do you want to mention the cluster?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So one of the other things that's coming up is that there's a new proposal that's out called the Druid Hills Charter Cluster. It's the only one, it would be just the second one in the state, and it would take the 5 feeder elementary schools, which include Fernbank, and the middle school and the high school. And it would basically pull them out from the county and make them a charter school. So it would give them greater autonomy. It would allow them to pay teachers on a different scale, which would bring teachers into the school district. It would allow them to fire teachers that are not performing, something that they really would like to do on occasion. It would allow them to have their own boards. They would no longer have the somewhat troubled DeKalb County board, although the board is in much better shape right now. And so they would basically operate very similar to the Decatur school system. And that's actually, the proposal has gone in front of the DeKalb County board, and the board is going to vote on it in November. There was an election that was held within the community, and the community voted 92% to support the charter cluster. And so now that's the charter cluster is in front of the board, and that will be voted on by November. If that does get approved in November, they will finish planning this year, and it will start in the 2014-2015 school year. And that would do a lot towards anything that the county does to bring the school system down. It's a great school system, but sometimes the county can do things that would kind of like resolve that, and the school would get to operate independently from the DeKalb County school system. So with all these great changes going on with the school system, it's worrisome to me that that would also be changed.
All right, thank you.
And just one note for Lisa, thanks for those details. We are going to send out the school ratings for the DeKalb County schools that we're currently in now, the Atlanta schools that we would potentially be in, as well as the Decatur schools, so that you can take a look objectively at where we can land and kind of draw your own thoughts and ask questions. I'm sure Lisa could help us with any questions on the DeKalb County schools.
All right, so if you guys have any more questions, please pass them to Karna. We'll go through these now. One of the questions was on whether or not Lakeside and Briarcliff could both be approved. And as they stand currently, as the city boundaries stand currently, they cannot both be approved because they overlap so greatly. If they were to yeah, sure. If they were to change those boundaries, then potentially they could both go through. But right now, that's not going to happen. I'm just putting the map back up so everybody can see the boundaries on what we talked about. So Lakeside, again, everything in red is Lakeside, and then the blue, which goes all the way up to 85 and 285, that's all Briarcliff. So there's a huge amount of overlap. Actually, almost all of Lakeside is overlapping with Briarcliff. All right, the next question is, if we're annexed, would we remain in the Druid Hills Historic District? This is a very good question. The best answer I have is yet to be determined. I think that there are examples of properties that have been annexed into Decatur that are no longer in the Historic District. Whether or not, if our whole community was annexed into Decatur, we would stay in the Historic District, I couldn't say. There is a precedent for us to not be in the Historic District. If, on the other hand, we were annexed into Atlanta along with the rest of Druid Hills, the thought is, again, I don't know for sure, but the thought is that we would stay in the Historic District because Atlanta does have a lot of that, Atlanta actually has a lot of the oversight on the Historic District already. Let's see. Next one is, if the Parkwood neighborhood is considered to be part of the larger Druid Hills community, would it not be best for the unincorporated portion to seek to align itself with the Druid Hills Association? I guess, you know, that's an option that we can look into. Everything's on the table. You know, we really have to make these kind of decisions as to whether or not we want to try to do something on our own as a neighborhood, or if we want to try to do something as part of a bigger area. So yeah, we certainly could do that. I'm not the one to say what's right for everybody in the room or in the neighborhood, but you know, it's certainly something that we could look at. Can a single family annex their home into the city of Decatur? Yes, there is a precedent for single properties to be annexed in. I believe that you would have to, as it currently stands, you would have to abut Decatur, or all of the properties between you and Decatur would have to go into Decatur, or if you have a split residence between unincorporated DeKalb and Decatur, you certainly can take that option. There's a precedent for that. It's something that you'd have to have the discussion with the actual city of Decatur to see if that could go through or Let's see what else I have here. I'm not sure if I can read that one. Did you write two here?
No,
There were two.
that's mine.
Go ahead and read it.
It's actually, I was wondering about, I need clarification. What is it on?
This is the one that you wrote. This is.
Oh,
That's
that's
right.
a little clear. And this could really be, if this could be put on the website, it would be easier than having you try to explain. But if there could be really clarification about which school, elementary, middle, and high school, would residents' kids attend each of the city proposals, including that annotation, specifically what schools, if that could be put on the website.
So the question is specifically which schools would a student attend, depending on whether they joined, whether one of the city proposals went through, or we were annexed, or whatever other options there are. I believe that we should be able to put that into a document. Yeah, we can pull that. And specifically, which school I know is important. I don't know if we can answer on the side of Atlanta, because I don't know if we were annexed into Atlanta. It's not clear at this point which zone we would be part of exactly. Is that for sure?
Well,
That's not a for sure thing.
Well, I was this side of Ponce, south of Ponce, typically goes to Mary Lynn. So north of Ponce goes to Spark and the new schools over there. But it might depend on the crowding of the schools. And then, of course, for Decatur, and I don't know if the Decatur residents would know, we're currently zoned for Oakhurst in our neighborhood, but there is talk now of opening up Westchester again. When I originally got here, it was Westchester, and now there's talk of reopening Westchester. All the schools have so many moving parts that we could say what is our best guess, but it might change.
Yeah, so we'll try to make that more clear. We'll try to put a document together. We don't know for sure on some of the options. Certainly, if Briarcliff becomes a city, our school zone would not change, not immediately. So, the next question is: I understand that Decatur rejected Druid Hills. Has that changed? Would Decatur accept the Parkwoods? I don't know how formal that proposal was. I don't know all the history on it, but I do believe there was discussion at one point for all of Druid Hills to become part of Decatur. Understanding that Decatur has just under 20,000 residents and Druid Hills has about 18,000 residents, that actually would double the size of Decatur. So I do know that part of the reason Decatur did not opt for that was that it wasn't economically feasible to bring in all those residences without the right amount of commercial property attached as well. I think that was part of it. I don't know all the specifics of that discussion, but I do believe that. I couldn't say. I couldn't say. I'm sure that information is available in the news and places we could look it up. So, all right, I believe that's it. If there's any other questions, I will direct you to the forum. We're going to send a link to everybody who's provided their email addresses. We'll get you signed up on there. You can ask questions. We'll do our best to try to answer, and we'll take it from there. All right. Thank you very much for everybody that came.
Thank you.
Yes.
If anybody has not signed up for Nation of Neighbors as for crime alerts, there's a